want to keep things moving a little bit here this hour. And next hour, we're going to have a little video clip right after next break turns out to be a great example. It's just something somebody alerted me to on the internet. I don't know the individual involved, but it's actually a very quick, snappy, lots of fun, perfect application of what I want to teach you, I want to introduce to you this hour, because we've been leading up to the game plan proper. And we are going to do our gardening using questions as a way of maneuvering in what otherwise would be maybe difficult conversations. And we are going to have a goal to try to just put a stone in someone's shoe. Just give them something to think about. And if we can do that, we're going to be happy. If we can put a few more stones and that's the way it goes, fine. But we're not shooting for the stars here. We're not swinging for the fences, right? We're just trying to do something very simple. In fact, the way I put it is I don't want you to swing for the fences. I don't want you even to get on base. All I want you to do is get in the batter's box. And the game plan that now I'm going to begin to lay out for you will help you to do that. I said that using questions accomplishes a couple of different things. It keeps you in the driver's seat. It gives you valuable information. It puts the ball in the other person's court. It gives you covering fire, so to speak. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to give you the details of the game plan. There are 3 uses of questions in the prosecution or the execution of the game plan, all right? And I want to tell you what the first step of the game plan is. But when I say the first step of the game plan, what I mean by that is I do not want you thinking anywhere beyond the first step when you are thinking about getting engaged in a conversation that has to do with spiritual things. Whether you're taking the initiative or the other person has already taken the initiative maybe against you a little bit, raise an objection or a challenge or whatever it happens to be. At this point, okay, now we're in play. We're ready to step in and we're going to use our game plan. And here's the first step. And what I mean is don't think about leading anybody to Christ. Don't even worry about that. It's not on the table right now. Do not even think about giving anybody the gospel. Do not worry about that. It is not on the table right now. Here's what you think about. Only one thing. Gathering information. That's the first step of the game plan. You are going to gather information. You are going to get some intel. Oh, there it goes with that military stuff again. Sorry about that. I don't know, it just works so well. You're going to gather intel. Nobody would go into a military thing without getting the lay of the land. You need to understand the lay of the land. You have to understand something about the individual, the circumstances, whatever, so that you know how to respond to each person. Colossians 4, verse 6. Back to that again. We've got to understand what we're up against, so to speak, before we know what direction that we might go. Somebody who's got kind of a pre-existing way of telling the gospel is already presuming something about the people that they're sharing the gospel with. Now think of Paul when he was at Mars Hill. I don't know, what is that, Acts 18 or so? Now Paul's at Mars Hill. He's in Corinth. This is Greek territory. And he understands that. He speaks Greek, obviously. He understands their way of thinking. He's got good education in multicultural and multiple cultures. But he starts with where these people are at. He looks around, he said, I notice that you got a lot of idols around here. Now, the fact that there were a lot of idols tormented him. It says that in the text. That bothered him. He was a Jew. He knows these are all nonsense. This is false gods. These are doctrines of demons these people are believing in. This is an offense to the God of all creation. But he's not making a fuss. He's just saying, I notice you guys are religious. And I even noticed that you have an idol to an unknown God. You're not taking any chances, right? You're covering all your bases. We're going to hit all these gods. And you know what? There might be some we don't know about, so let's build something for him. And he says, I know about that God. And let whatever it is that you are now worshiping in ignorance, let me declare to you openly. That's pretty cool, isn't it? So now he's got a platform, he's speaking, but he's kind of getting next to them before he gets going, or to enable him to get going. Now, there's no questions in that discourse. He's given a speech. But I want you to know what he is doing. He is understanding where they're coming from, understanding their point of view, understanding their religious convictions, and then he is using that as a platform to go forward and to work a message about Christ in there. And then he does very cleverly. So you can read about this later tonight. Just read that thing about what he says there in Mars Hill. And then he eventually, and he trades also on some common knowledge about spiritual things. The grace of God on everybody has given everybody some information. And so consequently, hold on just a second. Hold on. Talk awkwardly amongst yourself for a second. I got to write this down. I'll tell you why in just a minute. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm pausing my talk for a moment. I'm going to tell you what I just did. I have a rule. I never lose an idea. And sometimes you say something, you're moving on your feet like I'm doing right now, and lightning doesn't strike twice in the same spot. And there's no guarantee I'm going to think that brilliant thing again. So I'm going to put it down because I'm rewriting tactics and I want it to go into tactics, okay? This has to do with the Mars Hill deal because I've never really put it this way before with this material. But so what Paul is doing is he's just maneuvering with them, working with their ideas, finding common ground, and then he leverages that really nicely into a statement about Jesus, who is going to be the one who judges everyone, which, by the way, notice the bad news. Yeah. And there's proof that he's capable of doing that because God raised him from the dead. And of course, that becomes the end of the conversation because everybody go, oh, come on. Nonsense. And incidentally, did you ever hear this objection against the Gospels that Jesus and all that stuff is just a rehash of the ancient mythology of dying and rising saviors? Okay, now I talk about this actually at length in the Story of Reality. There's all kinds of things wrong with that assertion about where the Gospels come from. It's absolutely, completely dead in the water for a number of reasons. But notice the response at Mars Hill. The people there don't say, oh yeah, we've heard this story before, dying and rising gods. We kind of believe in that kind of thing. That's kind of neat. So this is another dying and rising god from ancient mythology or whatever. They don't say that. What do? They start laughing. Are you kidding? Somebody coming back from the dead? Nonsense. That's what they say. So, I mean, just on that issue, it's pretty amazing. It's clearly, this isn't like a tale that's going around that people are believing. There's a whole bunch of other things wrong with it, like I said. That the point I'm making here is that what Paul has done, and I'm encouraging you to use your questions to accomplish the same perspective, is he already has the lay of the land. He already understands what he's up against, and therefore he's able to tailor his comments specifically to that situation so that you know how to respond to each person. I mean, he's following his own advice there. And so what we are going to be doing then when we initiate or get involved in any conversation is we're going to be looking for information, and we are going to be asking questions of people to draw them out and to get more information from them. And so we are basically looking for two kinds of information. We're looking for general information about them, especially if there's somebody you just met, just being friendly. And you're also looking for what it is their convictions happen to be. What do they believe? Okay? And that will send you maybe more directly into a spiritual area if you're able to go there. Now, let me tell you about an example of how this worked out for me. When I got on an airplane once, there's a guy sitting next to me. His name was John. Now, I know his name was John because I said hi to him, and I introduced myself. We started talking a little bit. You say, once you have a little bit of a conversation, it's a good idea to, oh, I'm Greg, I'm John. Okay, that's it. And I find that people always look scary until you say, have one bit of conversation with them. You engage them a little bit, and all of a sudden, they instantly become human. They might look weird, but they're other, and that's probably a brilliant non-Christian who has all these objections that I can't answer. I mean, it's what we think. And then we say hi, and then they're not scary anymore. So I'm sitting next to him on the plane. Now, I had been at the takeoff, I had been actually reading my Bible, and I don't read my Bible all the time on the airplane. But if I want to read my Bible, I do read my Bible. I don't care what other people are thinking. Okay? Same thing when I bow my head and I give grace at dinner. I always do that. I'm not trying to show off, but I'm trying to give thanks, but I'm also showing people I'm not afraid to say thank you to God. And so I'm reading my Bibles are taken off. And by the way, it's not a prop either. It isn't like, anybody got a question? No, I'm just reading it. But he noticed it. In fact, as we're talking, he's asking me what I do, and I asked him what he did, and he's some kind of computer something or other, and I told him I was going to this city to do an event kind of like this, and he sees the Bible, so now he knows I'm a Christian, and he tells me, and I don't know if I asked him about this or he just volunteered, but he tells me that he is not a Christian. In fact, he doesn't know anybody that is a Christian. Now, let me ask you a question. Is this valuable information for me to know? Sure. Okay. Then he tells me he used to be a Christian, but he's not anymore. Is that valuable? Sure. Then he says, I used to be a preacher's kid. I said, John, how'd you used to be a preacher's kid? Did your dad die? He said, no, my dad didn't die. It's just my dad's no longer a preacher. In fact, my dad's no longer a Christian. Oh, is that valuable information? Is there any baggage sitting here next to me in that airplane? Absolutely. Can you imagine if I would have just jumped right into a little gospel presentation with a stranger? What would he have said? Been there, done that, and it hurt, right? But as it turned out, I didn't do that. I'm just drawing him out. I'm using my game plan. I'm what? Listening, okay? Because I need to figure out what's going on. As I'm listening to his story and using questions to clarify, and I'll give you a particular question in just a minute that will help you with that, to clarify and figure out what's going on. I'm not being defensive. I'm just listening. And what I realized, by the way, is there's kind of an image of his spiritual topography that's forming in my mind. And I realize there are minefields out there. And now I have the ability to maneuver around the mines. And why? How did that happen? Because I was listening. I was asking questions. I was drawing them out. I wasn't doing the talking. He was doing all the work. I was just paying attention. And then actually at one point he says, guys like you? And I'm thinking, why? What do you mean, guys like me? He means like guys that read Bibles on airplanes. Guys like you would really be angry at a guy like me, given what I've just said. He said, but you're not angry at me. And I appreciate that. Wow. Now, let me ask you here. I hope something is dawning in your mind a little bit. Do you think that just the fact that I listened to this dear young man who had had such a bad experience with Christians in the church, and I did not get defensive, and I did not get frustrated. In fact, he tells me, he said, people like you would really be mad right now at a person like me, but you're not being mad, and I appreciate that. Do you think that itself might have been a stone in his shoe? Might have kind of commended Christianity to him in a positive way? Of course. But what had I done? What was the profound thing I'd offer? I didn't offer anything. I just let him talk. I just drew him out. I just let him speak. That's how powerful this is. Now, I'll tell you, in this particular case, when I walked off that airplane, I had his email address in my pocket. How did that happen? because he was talking about an objection that he had. He had read some things about how the Bible had been changed, the manuscript evidence, and maybe he had read Bart Ehrman or others that have written on this issue. And so this has raised a question in his mind. It's an obstacle for taking Christianity seriously and the Bible seriously. And I said, well, I've actually written an article on that. Would you like to read it? And he said, yes. And I said, where should I send it? And then he gave me his email address. Now that's trust, isn't it? Okay. And by the way, the article that I sent him was one of the solid grounds that I had written in the past, the kind of thing that I invited you all to sign up for. And I'll send it to you on a bi-monthly basis because it comes out every other month, solid ground, and the mentoring letter comes out on alternating months. So if you were here, I'm saying if you're here today and you weren't here last night and didn't sign up for receiving that free training material, there's a card in the back, and Metri, did I get it right? Metri will help you out with that. In fact, she's fanning herself with one of those things right now. So she will give you a thing to fill out, and then we'll give you a little study device. It's called a quick study card or something about Jesus being the only way to salvation. It'll be our gift to you in exchange for your card. But that's the kind of thing that you would get, my treatment of the charge that the Bible's been changed, and I give all the information and everything. So I sent that to him, and then he sent me an email the next morning, and it said thank you, and I'd not heard from him since. Now, some of you might think, well, why didn't you kind of keep going? I said, because the guy's already been beaten up by Christians. I'm not going to be hot on his tail. I've already had a good conversation with him. I already what? Put a stone in his shoe. I already sent him something of substance to think about, and he's got my email, and str.org is right on the footer of the article. So he's got everything he needs to take the next step. I'm not going to chase him around. I'm going to leave him to the Lord. He is my task, but he's God's problem, right? So there's an example of just kind of beginning to maneuver using the questions and drawing people out. Now, I'm going to give you a model question for the first use of Columbo. I'm going to give you a model question that you can use to help get you going here. And it's a very simple question and it's very, very broad application. And that means I can use it in a variety of ways. I don't always use it precisely as I give it to you. It's the model. You can sometimes use it that way, or that you can adapt it to your circumstance to accomplish the same end. But here is the model question in order to use to get information. And the question simply is, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Now, if you remember the witch in Wisconsin, she was wearing the pentagram. I noticed that. This is probably, in her case, an occultic symbol. I asked her, what do you mean by that? It wasn't the words that I used. The words I used was, does that jewelry have religious significance to you? To which she responded, and that got into the conversation. So I'm gathering a particular kind of information, something I see, I'm using it as a springboard. Now, did I know that I would get in a conversation with her of any significance by asking that question? No, I didn't know. But in asking the question, now I can see the response, and if she gives me another place to move, then I'll take another step. If she gives me another place, I'll take another step. If there's something that she says that seems ambiguous or that needs clarification, are you saying, I'm trying to remember how the conversation went, people should be allowed to make their own choice. You mean a choice to kill babies? So here I am. That's a question. What would be a legitimate reason for it would be okay for people to kill babies? She says incest. So that was another question. So I'm using the same kind of maneuver. It's a very simple thing. What do you mean by that? But now it's adapted to the situation to get more information from her about what her view is. And I'm listening all the time. At any given step, I do not know if it's going to go any further, if it's going to die on the vine or make another step forward. That's okay. I'm just kind of following the game plan and seeing what God ultimately is doing. I don't have my ear tilted to heaven. Pardon me, I'm not hearing the voice of God or trying to feel where the Spirit's leading me. I think most of that is misapplied. Those passages are misapplied in Christians' lives the way they use it. That isn't the way the Scripture was talking about things. I don't think that's the way it works. What I was doing is I was putting myself in a position to be used by God, and God was sovereignly working and doing what he was going to do, and I'm just watching to see what he's doing. That's all. And I'm following along, and I'm taking the next step. It's not hard. It's quite easy. Okay, we're going to pause for just a second, and everybody stand up because I'm losing some of it. And if somebody's head is in your lap, just move it aside. Just stretch it out. Rub each other's shoulders for a minute. Slap each other in the face. You don't want to miss this stuff.
One thing I love about is just people are stretching.
Don't go anywhere. Just stretch.
That first question doesn't need to be combative at all.
No.
When Max and Clayton engaged the Mormon guys, he said, "Hey, what's the occasion?" Because they were all
Yeah,
dressed
right.
up, but he knew why they were dressed.
Right. Okay, I'm going to use that. That's really good. All right, sit down. Light them up, put them out. Okay. Pastor just mentioned that his son Max, in their situation, the question that was asked there, and really what I'm suggesting is the question is not a combative question. It's not, you're not looking for trouble. You are showing a genuine interest. And so when Max saw the LDS young men wearing their suits, I mean, they really stand out. So when you're wearing a suit and riding a bicycle, they didn't probably have the bicycles with them, did they?
No, we were at a restaurant.
They were at a restaurant, but all the suits were kind of a giveaway, but he wasn't, maybe not. And so what Max said is he came up to him and he said, "What's the occasion?" Because they're all dressed up, right? And what was their response specifically? Do you remember?
They said, well, we're missionaries and we're from the church. So they just talked about how they just got back from sharing their pamphlets with people.
Okay, so they said that they were from LDS Church and sharing their pamphlets. And then what was your next question?
Well, I just asked them where they were from.
Where they're from.
And kind of had that foundation, exchanged names, and then asked, hey, do you want to eat lunch or eat dinner together? And
You want to eat dinner together? Wow. Okay, and they said yes. Mm-hmm. And then do you remember the next question that you asked them that got you into more into spiritual things?
Yes, so I said, so you're missionaries, what do you guys believe?
That was so hard. Oh. You're so brilliant. Oh, how did you think of such a wise way to do it?
I read a great book.
Read a great book, yes. Plus his pop helped him along too. But you see this is see how simple that was? And what was he asking? What do you mean by that, essentially? Well, what's up with the clothes? Somebody die? He didn't say that because maybe somebody had, just go back from a wedding, or, well, we were missionaries. Really? Oh, you want to have lunch? Sit down with us. What's your religion? LDS. Okay, what do you believe? So now Max is getting an education. Now look you might think, I don't know anything about Mormons. I don't know how to witness to Mormons. You don't know anything about Mormons? I got a great idea. Ask them. You want to know what they believe? Ask them. And then guess what? You get a free education. You don't have to buy the book on this or that, how to witness to Mormons. Just ask a Mormon what they believe. And let them do it. When you're asking, you still have no commitment to get to the gospel, to get them to sign on the dotted line. Actually, you pretty much realize at this point, if you're talking to a missionary of an opposing religion, which is what we're talking about with LDS, these are not Christians. All right? They're nice people, but they are not Christians because they deny every single thing that is central to your convictions as a Christian. They deny the God that you believe in, the Jesus that you believe in, the way you understand human beings, and the fall, and the nature of salvation, and the nature of the afterlife. Every single thing is different. It's an entirely different religion. Just for the record, there's a whole lot of Christians that are confused on this. Not here probably, and I mean that genuinely, but a lot of them are. Okay? So if you're talking to a person who's a missionary of another religion, you're probably not going to get them to pray to receive the real Jesus at lunch, you know? But you could, what? Put a stone in their shoe, depending on how the circumstances go. You don't know, though, and all you're going to do is use your game plan to get rolling, which is exactly what Max was doing. Now he's rolling. Now is there a combat here? Is there hard feelings? Is there an argument? Are people mad? No, it's wonderful. You got a really nice real Christian and really nice phony Christians. Everybody's nice. And everybody wants to talk. So far, so good. In fact, they ended up coming to church, didn't they?
Yes, sir.
At your invitation. Okay, so, I mean, we don't have to get into all the details. You can ask Max later about how all of that went. But I just want you to see how it all started. It was really simple. And he was conscientiously using the game plan. You'd been taught this. And so this is a way that he's putting it into play. It's just excellent. It's an excellent example. Now, this what do you mean by that question is also particularly good when you are opposed with some particular charge or challenge, okay? So there was a young man who came up to me at Summit Ministries in Colorado Springs, a Christian guy, student, and he said, somebody said to me, everything's relative. How do I answer that argument? That's what he asked me as the instructor. I pointed out, first of all, it's not an argument, it's just a point of view, okay? Just saying your point of view isn't an argument. An argument entails reasons for the point of view. There's no reason given. It's not an argument. It's just an assertion. Secondly, you should never try to answer that kind of statement initially. You had better ask some questions first. And what kind of question would you ask here? What do you mean by that? So the person says everything's relative. Look, I wrote a book on relativism. I know what relativism is. But that doesn't mean the person who says everything's relative knows what relativism is. You know why? Because people don't think about the things that they say. They are socialized, especially now, to say particular things that are meant to put off the people that they disagree with. They're not meant to get into meaningful discussions. They're meant to win. And they use these kinds of challenges as power moves to shut you up. And so this particular Christian didn't have anything to say. That's why he's coming to me. Now, I'm not chastising the Christian. I'm just saying this is the dynamic. And so I wrote the book on relativism, a book on relativism, which is titled, well, the book sounds pretty good too, which is titled Relativism, just, for the record. But I wouldn't jump into a refutation of relativism at that point. I would do something else. I would ask a question. And the question I'd ask is, what do you mean by that? In particular, I'd ask, what do you mean by relativism? You say everything's relative. What do you mean by relativism? So I want him to respond. I want him to explain it to me. And I'll see what he's got. And maybe he's got something. Maybe he's got a point of view. Yeah, Nietzsche said that all learning or knowledge is perspectival and blah, 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 blah. Okay, now you get the deal. Okay, now I know what you mean by relative, but I have another question. You said everything's relative. What do you mean by, help me out. Yeah, what do you mean by everything? There's only one word left in the sentence, folks. Come on. I know it's just after lunch. I'm trying to make it really easy on you. So, everything. What do you mean by everything? He said, what do you mean by everything? Everything means everything. I say, wait a minute. If everything is relative in the sense you just said everything, isn't the sentence everything's relative part of everything? And if it is part of everything and everything is relative, then that makes the statement itself what? Also relative. Ooh. You see maybe a problem there? Now, for some of you who've been around for a while in this, you know what's going on. This is the suicide tactic trying to creep in here, and because the person's statement itself turns out to be self-refuting. It can't live up to its own demand right there, you know. If everything's relative, then the statement everything's relative is also relative and not particularly true. So what are we to make of that? You know, dead in the water. I'm just making the point, when people make charges, you want to have more clarification. Well, I don't believe in God. I'm an atheist. Really? What kind of atheist are you? What kind of God don't you believe in? If you don't believe in a God, or if that person doesn't believe in a God, like an old man with long beard up in the heavens somewhere, I said, well, I don't believe in that kind of God either. Okay? If he says, well, I don't believe in a God of organized religion, but maybe of some kind of force, like like Star Wars, or what was that movie where they had the blue people? Avatar, yeah. They were blue, weren't they? Yeah, okay. Maybe the Avatar kind of thing, you know. Okay, well, they might, okay, now I got more information. They might say, you know, look, I'm a Richard Dawkins kind of guy. I don't believe in anything I can't see, smell, hear, taste, you know, that kind of deal. I'm a materialist, right? Nothing exists except for physical stuff. It's meat all the way down. Okay, now I know. Now I've got information more about that person's worldview. In fact, you know, if you think about it, and especially if this seems like still a little daunting for you to kind of go forward with a game plan like this, why not just commit yourself in the next, say the next couple of weeks, to just drawing people out and asking what they believe? I'll just do this, one person a day, one stranger a day, you know, befriend and say, look, I'm just been thinking a lot about stuff, about deeper things. I don't know. I'm trying to get people's opinion to kind of make my own mind up about some things. And I wonder if I could ask you a question. And no, go ahead. I said, what do you think happens when you die? What do you think happens when you die? There it is. Then they'll tell you. Yeah, you're not going to try to refute them. You're not going to gainsay them. You're not going to say aye or nay. You're not going to try to read the four laws to them. You're not going to try to lead them to Christ. It's not this. That is not the exercise. The exercise is just to find out what people think, what they believe about deeper things. You're in a completely passive position. That's it. You're just taking mental notes. But you know what it's doing? It's getting you into the conversation. It's getting you into play. Guess what? You know, I'd not thought of this quite so much before, but if you say, what do you think? If they let you ask the question, and by the way, that's just a sample probing question. You can do this any way you want, whatever feels comfortable to you. But if you ask them, what do you think happens when you die? This forces them to think about that question. And maybe it hasn't occurred to them yet because they're too young and they don't think they're ever going to die. Or maybe it's been bothering them a lot and now you're giving them a chance to voice their own concern. I don't know. You don't either until you what? Ask the question. So this is a way of just kind of getting into it easily. You're just committing yourself, and even if you don't want to take the initiative and tap somebody out and say, hey, what do you think happens when you die? But you're just alert in conversations, and so you're taking an opportunity to ask the question, what do you mean by that? Just to get more detail on what people think. Then you can do it that way too. I did training like this for a group at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis. And it was a church right off campus. And after we were done with the training like this, then everybody was going out in the afternoon to go onto campus. And they had a little questionnaire to ask questions like, what do you think happens when you die or whatever of the students. Now, this was some of the students were absolutely mortified to do this. Think of it. Some of they were adults, but some of the students in my class is what I mean, to go out and talk to college students. And I noticed, though, when people do these kind of things and they engage, that there are two things that ends up happening, two realizations that they have. And the first realization, and this was part of the feedback when we got back, the one woman said, when you said we were going to go out and actually do this thing that we're being trained to do, and I'm not going to send you out anywhere this afternoon, just so you know, I'm not going to spring this on you, so don't be worried. Some of you are going, oh, University of Tennessee, we're going to be there tonight. No, she said, when you said that, we're going out. She said, the fear rose in me to such a degree that I was more afraid of going to talk to people than I was of having a baby. It was more frightening her than childbirth. Now, I know that hurts, doesn't it? She said she would rather have a baby than do that. But she said when she came back, she said, I actually had a good time. That's what she said. And one of the things that she found out, pardon me, hold on. One of the things that she found out, and you will discover too, is that people are not as scary as you thought. They're not as scary as you thought. I'm sorry. I think I got it. There's a second thing you'll find out is people are not as smart as you thought. Now, again, this is not a put down. The point is, though, people sound very convincing when they give their point of view with all their confidence. But when you probe them a little bit about the substance of their point of view, there's often is not much there. In fact, they come into the conversation, and I've seen this happen lots of times, with kind of like their sails are full. And they drift in, with these full sails, making their claims about things. And they seem a little bit ominous until you ask a question. And then when you ask a question, sometimes, not always, but sometimes you see the wind just go out of the sails. And they're foresheets to the wind because they don't know what to say. And that's why I give a warning here when you start probing people with questions about their own views for clarification. You are often going to get a response that I call the Simon and Garfunkel response. Remember those guys back in the 60s, early 70s, wrote that wonderful music? They're still alive, by the way. They're really, really old, but they're still alive. In 1966, they wrote a song called The Sounds of Silence. And that's what you get many times when you ask a person, what do you mean by that? You get the sounds of silence. You'd expect they'd know what they meant by that, but they don't explain it because they haven't really thought about it. So do some of you know who Nabil Qureshi was? Brother in Christ who died last year, okay? Hands just, okay. Nabil wrote a wonderful book called Seeking Out Finding Jesus. And Nabil became a Christian in 2005. That's when I first met him. And so I knew Nabil for his entire Christian life. He died last year. Really tragic situation. He died of cancer. It breaks my heart just to even recall it, because it was just about a year ago that I went to his funeral in Houston. And but Nabil was won to Christ by David Wood. And David Wood has his own story. It's not in the book about Nabil's conversion. Oh, David's there, but David's story is not. And if you want a wild ride, go to YouTube, type in David Wood, Why I Am a Christian. Just type that in, and then fasten your seatbelts for 40 minutes. And you're going to hear a testimony David gives. It's he's actually giving it, walking through New York, down in the subways, and then coming out. It's all one take. It's amazing. You will not believe it. But when you listen to his testimony, David Wood, Why I Am a Christian, on YouTube, you'll understand why he had so much confidence when he was confronted by a young Nabil Qureshi, Muslim evangelist for Islam. And they were both on a debate team together in a university, and so they were both on the same team, and so they're sharing a room, and Nabil comes into the room, and he sees David Wood sitting in the chair reading a Bible, and he says to David Wood, you know that book has been corrupted. So this is a hard charge against the Christian and against the Bible, and it's a standard Muslim pushback against Christianity. We read a corrupted text. Now, it's not a sound objection, but it's a standard objection. And David is sitting there, and he hears Nabil say this, and he just simply says, his first response is, go on. How many here would have the courage when confronted by a Muslim who levels an assault on the Bible you're reading, to say, tell me more. But that's what he did. And you might not realize it, but that's kind of an example of the first move in Columbo. He's gathering information. Tell me more, tell me more. And so Nabil goes on and on about this, and then David says, what parts of the Bible have been corrupted? So this is another clarification question. Nabil told me I was absolutely flat-footed when he asked me that question. Nabil's a very, very smart guy, and he was very aggressive. He got mellower, as he got older in the Lord under the tutelage of Ravi Zacharias. That was a big help. But he's a pretty aggressive guy, and brilliant, absolutely brilliant. In any event, so he's a guy, doesn't get flat-footed much. He didn't know how to respond because nobody had ever asked him that question. What parts of the Bible are corrupted? He didn't know how to answer that, okay? And I think of our LDS friends who say, well, the Bible is reliable as far as it's properly translated. That's a standard perspective of theirs. And, of course, my question would be then, oh, okay, well, good, I believe that too. I believe the Bible's accurate only if it's translated correctly. But what parts haven't been translated correctly? That's a question for them. And if you don't ask them that, whenever you raise a verse against their theology, they're going to get dismissive of it because they've got this qualifier which they haven't clarified. That's why this kind of clarification is helpful. Okay. Now, there's a lot of different examples of this kind of thing that I could give to you, all right? But I think you're getting the point. You're just drifting in here. It's not really drifting. You're working purposefully, but you're relaxed and you're casual, and you're trying to gather more information. That's your first step of your game plan. And as you get the information, then maybe you see an opening to go further, and maybe you don't. You do not know what purposes God has for any conversation. You do not know that. Even if you feel led to talk to the person, you still don't know the purpose God has for that conversation because God doesn't tell us that kind of stuff. It might be that the purpose is for something for you and not for that person. You don't have to worry about that. This is what I was talking about last night. No pixie dust. You don't have to know what God's thinking. God's sovereign will is his business. It's not our business. We don't have to worry about that. All we have to know is we're in his hands, and we just be obedient and do what we can do and make the best use of the opportunity that's given us. We ask some questions and then see where it goes. And see, this is a question, what do you mean by that? That you can ask all day long until the cows come home, all right? And there's no vulnerability to you whatsoever, okay? There is a little liability. And so, guys, if your wife calls you an idiot,
don't say, what do you mean by that?
Don't ask, what do you mean by that? Exactly. She may, where do you want me to start? That kind of deal. All right. Okay, so that's the first step. See how easy that is, okay? And again, there's more in the book, and I can talk more about it, but I want to cover some other ground first, okay? That's our first step, okay? We're gathering information. We're asking, what do you mean by that? Okay, now here's the next step, and here's what I want you to write down to describe the second step. It's called reversing the burden of proof. Reversing the burden of proof. Okay, now I've used a phrase that you might have heard before, burden of proof. Can somebody, especially somebody who's not tutored in this already, can somebody else tell me what the phrase burden of proof means? What does it mean? What does the phrase burden of proof mean? Help me out. Anybody?
Evidence that backs up your assertion.
Pardon me?
Back up your assertion.
Okay, backing up the assertion, all right? Somebody in a conversation has the responsibility to back up or give evidence for something here, all right? Now, who is it in any conversation who bears the burden of proof? Yes. The person who makes the proposition, or more simply, whoever makes the claim bears the burden. Whoever makes the claim, especially if it's controversial, if somebody says, this is the way it is, and it's a controversial thing that they're claiming, then they have some responsibility of giving reasons why they think that controversial thing is the way they see it. So if the DA knocks on your door, bop, 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 you open the door and they say, you robbed the bank, you get to say to the district attorney, what? Prove it. Why? Because the burden of proof in American jurisprudence usually is supposed to fall on the accuser. All right? And so this is true in conversation as well. The burden of proof is on the person who makes the controversial claim. By the way, I was given this teaching at Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, 3 services Sunday morning, 1,000 people in each service. And I'm talking about this tactic, and I mentioned, the attorney knocks on your door and says, you robbed the bank, you get to say to him, and then somebody from the back of the room says, which bank? That really happened. No, I didn't rob that one, I robbed a different one. That's so, The burden of proof is on the person who makes the controversial claim. Now, here's why this is so important. Because much of the time when Christians are confronted with a challenge, the challenger puts his challenge out there and then thinks that just by putting the challenge out there, they win the argument. And it's now the responsibility of the Christian to defeat the point rather than that person to defend the point. That is backwards. When we allow that to happen, when we take the burden of proof on ourselves, when the other person's making the claim, we are giving them a free ride. And the rule here is no more free rides. People make claims, fine. Now it's your job to defend them. No more free rides. In the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, they got a lot of splaining to do themselves. I know only half of you know who Ricky Ricardo is. Lucy, you cannot be on the show. You know that guy. You know what a gauntlet is? When they say throw the gauntlet down, what's a gauntlet? It's a glove, right? A medieval glove. What did it signify when they throw the gauntlet down? It's a challenge. So when the one knight would throw his gauntlet into the arena for the challenge, he doesn't say, I win, right? The other guys are saying, what do you mean? You win. You just got in the game. Now you got to put up or shut up. You got to show us what you got. You don't win just because you join up. And by the same token, if somebody's in the game, so to speak, a discussion about something important, and they throw in their point of view, they don't win just because they've said something. Now, there's a whole generation of people now who think that if they simply emote in your direction, that they've given an argument. And they are justified in their indignation regarding the issue against you, just because they've said it. And we're not going to let it lie there. I was on a radio show in Southern California, it's KFI. This is Tennessee, so you probably don't get it. The KFI goes clear all the way to the Mississippi River. It's 60,000 watts. At nighttime, when the smaller stations shut down, they just power all the way across half of the continent here. So I'm on Sunday night on the show, and I'm being interviewed. And it's the issue of intelligent design. And so I'm making my case for the design in the universe. And they open the lines, and this is where all the crazies call in. It's a very secularized talk show. It's the shock jocks that are, the hosts. And so somebody calls in and begins invoking Big Bang cosmology against my view of intelligent design. Now, I know this is controversial in Christian circles. Some people are really uncomfortable about the Big Bang. I'm not in the least bit uncomfortable about it because it seems to fit our story perfectly. I mean, how does our story start? In the beginning, bang! Just in case you were nodding off. I mean, that's it. That's our story. And so if there's any scientific evidence for that, and some people think there is, most non-Christians do, then that's evidence that our story starts the way you think the world story starts. We explain it the same way. Now, so you've got to have, and this is what I explained to the caller, and simply put, and you can make this argument in a very complicated way called the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God. William Lane Craig wrote a whole book on it, okay? Now, it's a great material. It's a great argument, but I'm going to save you a lot of money, and I'm going to cost Bill some royalties. Sorry, Bill. But here's the simplest way to think about it. A big bang needs a big banger. Right? Yes. There it is. There's the Kalam cosmological argument in a nutshell. If you can get that in your head, you got it in a nutshell, right? That was a joke. She got it. A big bang needs a big banger. So I'm making this case. You can't get something from nothing, basically. Now, he disagrees with me. He's going to tell me how you can get something from nothing. Okay? And so this is what he says, and I have a copy of the conversation. Where is it? Okay. He says, well, I don't think it is. In other words, Big Bang isn't on your side, because now he's going to explain how you can get something from nothing. He said, I don't think it is because, well, you could start with a base of nothing, and you could say that there was nothing but an infinite, continuous moment, and eventually one tiny, little, insignificant thing happened. A point happened in the nothingness. Let me just pause for a second. That's the problem, isn't it? How do you get a point in the nothingness? So did he give me an argument for his view? No, he just restated. He just restated the same point in different words. A point happened in the nothingness. Maybe it's a really small point, makes it easier, but extremely simple, he says. That's really simple. Requires no intelligence. So no intelligent God had to intervene. All we need is a tiny little imperfection in the perfect nothingness. By the way, did you ever notice, maybe you don't talk with people about things like this, but when you get into conversations, those of you who do, and there's a book right now by Lawrence Krauss called Something from Nothing. Is that it? Something from Nothing. I think The Universe from Nothing. That's what it is. He's a famous cosmologist. William Lane Craig has debated him a couple of times in Australia. In any event, you read these books and you listen to these conversations, and they always treat nothing as if it's something. They always treat nothing as if it's something. This is why I don't talk about nothing. I talk about no thing. No thing. And if you have no thing, that no thing cannot have any adjectives describing it because there's no thing there to be described. So how do you have a perfect no thing? There you have the perfect no thing. And then when Larry King was talking about this, he said, but who created nothing? I'm not kidding you. Larry King is a bright guy. He's not in business anymore. He's retired, but he's a bright guy. But who created nothing? That's a dumb statement. I'm sorry. Anyway, okay. All we need is a little tiny imperfection in the perfect nothingness, and that imperfection expanded, became variegated, increasing in complex, and soon you had galaxies and planets. So he sees this. First you start with nothing, and nothing's kind of a placid pond, and then some speck of something where he doesn't say where it came from, just comes and then lands into the pond of nothing, and then the pond of nothing starts bucking and weaving and starts spitting out planets and everything, galaxies and the like. See, now I got to answer this guy because I'm on national radio and KFI, more stimulating talk radio. So what am I going to say? And I'm thinking, I'm in Los Angeles. This guy's on drugs, what's going on here? How do you respond? And here's what I did. I employed my tactical approach in this regard, our second step. I said, it's interesting how you started this. You started by saying, you could say that, and then you told your story. I said, you're right. You can say anything you want, but giving us reasons to believe what you said, that's another thing altogether, and you have not done that. So I have nothing to respond to. People spin all kinds of yarns. All kinds of speculative theories. We talked about that yesterday from 2 Corinthians chapter 10. Is that right? Speculative theories that we're to be tearing down. There are all kinds of fanciful stories they come up with. All right? Well, you're welcome to come up with fanciful stories. That's the way a lot of problem solving gets done about how the world is and how science, all of that works. You start out with speculations, but you've got to go beyond speculations. Speculations aren't arguments. Stories are not arguments. That's a bedtime story. That is just some kind of speculation that sounds great, but it's meant to put your own idea to bed. And I just want you to see it for what it is. That person has to do more than tell a rhetorically persuasive story. They have to give us reasons why they think that story is actually accurate to the way things really are. And that they almost never do. And that's what you ask of them in the second step of our tactical game plan. And the question you ask them, here's the model question, is, now how did you come to that conclusion? Now how did you come to that conclusion? Or something like that. What are your reasons for that? Why do you think that's the way it actually took place? You're asking for their rationale. And by the way, especially for those of you who are homeschooling, but this is just for general use because this kind of thing isn't taught much anywhere. Critical thinking skills, in a sense, the first two steps of the Columbo tactic, which is your two steps of the game plan to get you into play, are also the first two steps of critical thinking skills. Because if you want to think critically about any idea, you have to focus in on what that idea is first. And once you get a clear idea of what that idea is, you then want to ask, what are the reasons given to support that idea? And sometimes it's hard to do both when you're dealing with something that somebody else has written or something in a debate, political or otherwise, on TV or whatever. Okay, let's just get down to it. You get the verbiage aside and get the rhetoric aside, and what precisely are you claiming is true? And once you fix on that, then what are the precise reasons that you think it's true? And here is the number one reason that most people on the political left, I'm not beating up on them, but it's a good example right now, think that their views are true, whatever they happen to be. Here is the reason why. The reason is because anybody who disagrees with them is racist, bigoted, intolerant, homophobic, Islamophobic, and right on down the line. Wait, that's not a good reason to believe in a view. That's just putting the other side down. Right. That's just putting the other side down. That's all it's doing. So this is not good reasoning. What this is an example of, what do they call it when you beat up the other guy instead of this idea? Attack the man, ad hominem, okay? You attack the man. So somebody says, you're intolerant. Okay, I always have a question when anybody says to me that I'm intolerant. What do you think that question might be? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Why would you call me intolerant? What am I doing? Well, you think you're right. You think you're right and everybody else is wrong. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think when I give my point of view that I think that I'm correct and that other people are mistaken? What do you think? Those who disagree are, yes, of course I think I'm right. If I didn't believe that my views were true, I would not believe what I believe. I would believe something else and believe that were true instead, right? Just like everyone else. And by the way, this is the takeaway for this particular point. Just like everyone else. Everybody in the game has a point of view and everybody thinks their view is right. Now, they may not know their view is right. That's a different step. But they think they're right, which is why they're making their point. But why is it only one side is getting called names for thinking they're right, or being called arrogant, or narrow-minded, or intolerant, or bigoted, and on down the line? So when somebody says that to me, and they say, well, you think you're right? I say, well, I do think I'm right. I could be mistaken. I'm willing to acknowledge that, like I said last night. But I'm not making this up. I have some reasons. But let me ask you the question. So I'm now turning it around. So I'm back. Let me ask you the question. There's Columbo. The views that you have, do you think your views are right? Now, what's the person going to say? Nope. I think I'm wrong in everything I believe. No, of course they think they're right. So both of us think we're right. This is the case in every single conversation when you have 2 points of view. But in only one case is there name calling that's going on, and that's all it is. So, by the way, the way I finish this conversation, in case you missed it, okay, you're intolerant. What does that mean? Well, you think you're right. Yeah, but do you think you're right? Of course you think you're right. Some people say, well, I think my views are true for me. And to which I have another question. If your views are just true for you, why are you talking to me? Because obviously they're trying to correct you, right? They want me to be tolerant like them. I'm wrong, they're right. You know, let's be honest. And my feelings aren't hurt if you think I'm wrong. It doesn't bother me. But let's face it, we both think that we're right. Okay, my final question is, why is it when I think I'm right, I'm intolerant, and when you think you're right, you're just right? What am I missing here? Now, again, that's a question, so I'm tossing the ball in their court. And they've got to answer it. And what I'm trying to get them to see is this is a bunch of nonsense. What if the person said, he said, Koukl, you're intolerant. I said, and you're ugly. No, I wouldn't say that to them because not only is it rude, but it's irrelevant. Can an ugly person be right? Yes. You better hope so. I've never done that before with an audience, but fortunately it worked. Yeah, can an intolerant person be right? Can a bigoted person be right? Can a racist person be right? You can have all manner of vice in your character, and you could still be correct about some things. And you might be correct about every matter of fact that you're discussing, even if you've got bad character along with your good point of view. It's irrelevant to the point, any part of your character, but so many people now think this is all there is you have to do. You bigot, you racist, you homophobe, on and on and on. And they've done the job. It's not an argument. It's name calling. We were supposed to stop doing that when we were in second grade. And with all the talk about bullying, from the left, that's where you're getting most of this, there is all the same kind of bullying going on all the time. That's all this is bullying. Verbal bullying, but it's bullying nonetheless. Now, I'm not troubled by it. I know what it is. I want to call a spade a spade. I want to show you what's going on here. And by using my questions, I can help them to see. This is just name calling. You might say, why did you change the subject? What do you mean? Well, we were talking about same-sex marriage, and now we're talking about my character. I was trying to give you reasons why I thought this was not a good idea for a country, and so you call me a homophobe. Well, maybe I am a homophobe. I don't know. Maybe. Okay, how if I just said I'm a homophobe? Okay? And I agree with you that I'm a really nasty guy. Now, can we go back and talk about same-sex marriage, about whether that's a good idea or not? I actually did that on a TV show once. I was being posed by 3 people, and same thing. And I said, okay, so I'm a bad guy. I'm the meanie. Okay, I'll disagree with. How about if we just talk? I agree with you. I'm all these things that you're saying that are true about my character. I'm really a bad guy. Okay, I agree with you there. Now, we've all agreed on that I'm a nasty guy. Now, can we talk about this issue that really we're on TV to talk about? Okay? And they didn't get it, of course. They missed the entire point. I don't have time to go into that whole anecdote, but it was on Canada national TV. And so what we want to do with the second use of Columbo is we want to hold people's feet to the fire and require of them to give a rationale for what they're saying. And when we do this, when we say, how did you come to that conclusion? We are making a presumption. It's a charitable presumption. We are presuming that they actually came to a conclusion. In other words, they were thinking through it enough to have reasons for their point of view. And I'll tell you a secret, most people have not done that. This is true on both sides of the aisle, non-Christians and Christians. We haven't come to conclusions. We have been socialized to believe what we believe. And even though the belief may be true, we don't know the rationale that can show it to be true to others. And so when you ask somebody else about their rationale, which they don't have, don't be surprised if you get, again, the Simon and Garfunkel response. Sounds of silence. okay? Let the silence do its work. Let them think through it. By the way, I have had I've had people tell me when I said, how'd you come to that conclusion? What are your reasons for that view? And they've said, I don't have any reasons for that view. Really? And so I have another question for them. And the question is, why would you believe something you have no reasons to believe? And they've said to me, I don't have a reason for that either. At least they're consistent. But this actually happens. I'm not making the stories up. This happens. Okay, so now we got two pieces in place right now. We've got use in your game plan. The first step is to what are we trying to do with the first step? Gather information. That's all we're worried about. Okay, we want to get a clear take on their point of view. We're using a model question, something like, "What do you mean by that?" Okay, and if it turns out that they make an assertion about something that we've just gotten clarification on, and it's a controversial issue that they've weighed in on, now we have another question that we want to ask them to get a different kind of information. And that question is, how'd you come to that conclusion? And we're going to see if they have anything to say. And it's not until we get all of that that we have any real obligation to go forward, okay? He does not know what just had happened, okay? And again, I'm not trying to disparage him, all right? He does not know what just happened. But do you see what happened? Okay, now a couple of things are going on here. First, you've got a very sharp questioner, and he sees a problem immediately. He sees that for all the pomp and splendor rhetorically that you get from Deepak Chopra. If you ever listen to him, he's got lots of words that sound profound, okay? But what this questioner realized is that his view was self-defeating. It was self-defeating, okay? Now, the suicide tactic, just to give you a quick glimpse of it, and I have like 3 chapters on suicide. There's lots of ways that this can come into play, but a suicide tactic is a tactic you employ when you realize the other person's point of view is self-defeating or self-refuting. It's like when a person says, I cannot speak a single word in English. There are no sentences in English that are more than 3 words long. You know, obviously the claim is being made, but in the process of making the claim, there is a defeating counterexample in the claim itself. The claim can't live up to its own demands, so to speak, you know, and therefore it's self-defeating. You don't need to do anything with that. All you need to do is recognize it and then point it out. And that's exactly what the gentleman in the red shirt did. He did not have to pontificate on it. All he said is, do you believe that? Yes, and thank you. Then he walks away. That's it. Perfect. It's a perfect execution of the tactic. Now, the tactic is not meant to make people look stupid, but sometimes people do look stupid because of the, you know, I guess parents don't like me using the S word, but because of the stupid things they say. Maybe we should just call it foolish, okay? Because of the foolish things. They look foolish because of the foolish things they say, okay? Don't say stupid. And there are times when you're going to use your tactical approach, and that's what's going to happen. They're going to be standing there like, what hit me? And again, it's not for the purpose of making people feel foolish. And you could even apologize. Somebody said, look, I'm not trying to make you feel uncomfortable, but I don't get this. Help me out here. When I did my debate against Deepak Chopra, I missed an opportunity because he was coming after me as the Christian person who believed that Jesus is the only way of salvation. And believing that your way is the way is arrogant and narrow-minded. That was the nature of the conversation. And I wish I had the book in my lap at the moment because I'm in a sound stage all by myself looking at a camera. Deepak is in New York and Lee's in another sound stage at another part of the building. So no, we're not together. We're all kind of separated out on the screen. So I'm just looking at a camera. I'm not with a person. But I wish I had the book that Deepak Chopra was promoting on that show, which was titled Love is the Way. And he's harassing me on the air because I think my way is the way, Jesus. And his book says love is a... Deepak, look at the title of your book. Please, I didn't do that. I didn't have the book. I didn't know until we're rolling that was the thing. And this all didn't come together for me, that particular point. And just to make the point that a lot of times when you're engaged in these kinds of things, you're not going to think of everything that you could think of to say. You think of some of this stuff when the pressure's off. You say, oh, man, wish I would have thought of that. Which, by the way, is a clue here about how you can improve your Koukl technique. So let me just say this quickly and then we'll go to break. One of the best ways to be more quick on your feet under pressure is to think the issues through when you're not under pressure. And when are you not under pressure? Either before the encounter or after the encounter. So notice how we went through some things here today as a team, and you guys actually came up with really good questions that you could have used if somebody raised that issue to you in that scenario. Don't forget those questions. Or maybe be thinking about what is the kind of thing that I've run into a couple of times that I do not know how to respond to. I feel flat-footed when people ask me this or push back in this way. Okay, well, I don't know what that is for you, but you might say, that's this thing right here. You write it down. Okay, now I'm going to brainstorm some questions that I can ask that will allow me to get in and toss the ball into their court in a productive way. Maybe we'll do a little exercise in that when we get back. But do you see what I'm talking about here? Once you do that in advance, then you're ready. Gee, I know we got to go to break. I just keep thinking of these other things. Let me give you one more thing, okay? I'll tell you an example of how this has worked for me. I think one of the most... I'm watching this video, and I'm seeing this atheist rant and rave against Ray Comfort. You know who Ray Comfort is? Living Waters. I like Ray a lot, and Kirk lives just down the road from me. And so I work with these guys on occasion with things, and in this video, this atheist is going on and on and on about how awful the Bible is, and slavery in the Bible, and rape is encouraged, and blah, 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 blah. All these things that actually are kind of hard, things from the Old Testament, genocide in the Old Testament, that are hard to respond to, and you can't respond to them in a soundbite because they're complex issues. And you can write an article about it, and I've done some of that on some of these issues, like the genocide question, and that's on our website. Canaanites, Genocide or Judgment is the title of it. But in any event, I'm looking at this and I think, boy, I'm glad I'm not Ray right now. I'm looking at this a week and a half ago. So I know what I know, but I'm still looking at this. I'm thinking, oh my, what would I say? If somebody came on really strong to me, what would I say? With all of those challenges stacking up against me, what would I say? What question would I ask? And finally I thought of it. I'd say to the atheist, okay, what's the alternative? I see what you're saying. I read the passages. I know what you're talking about. Okay, let me just ask you a question. What is the alternative? Now, why do I ask that? Because I know what the alternative is. His alternative, which is atheism. And if atheism is true, nothing is wrong. Let me just say that again. If atheism is true, nothing is wrong. Because if materialism is the way the world is, then moral rules which are not material, moral obligations which are not made of stuff, physical stuff, don't exist. And if they don't exist, there is no obligation on human beings to obey laws that don't exist. There is no right and wrong. Oh, well, our evolution, all that means is that maybe evolution taught you to believe something existed that doesn't, but it doesn't. Now you're thinking about it. You've been tricked by evolution. I mean, some philosophical atheists are very clear on this. Michael Roos from Florida State University, yeah. There is no morality. He's an atheistic evolutionist. There is no morality. Okay, is that a better solution? What those guys did in the Old Testament, would you call genocide? That's not wrong on your view. See, what I've done now is I've tried to sidestep the challenge, which is too complicated to answer in that kind of situation, and also when he's really angry. And I've countered with a what? A question that puts the ball into his court and forces him to make sense out of his alternative that actually, in a certain way, my question trades on the emotional intensity of his moral indignation about what he sees in the Old Testament. Because it's going to be hard for him to say there's nothing wrong with this now. But that's what he's forced to say as an atheist. Now, I haven't used that yet with somebody, but guess what? I'm ready. It's ready in my pocket. It's 3 words. What's the, did I say alternative? What's the alternative? I'm ready with it. Now it's your turn to talk. What do you mean? What's the alternative? Well, okay, you don't like God. You got rid of God. Okay, that's bad stuff. Okay, now you're an atheist. You see these things all these people did. Tell me, what do you make of that now as an atheist? Well, I think it's wrong. Whoa. I don't know what that even means. When you say it's wrong, that means what? Well, I feel that it's wrong. I don't care what you feel. They felt it was right. Okay, you have your feelings. They have their feelings. Okay, so who's to say? Your grandma? Who's making these rules up? Are you making the rules up? You're forcing your rules on us? Do you see how that changed the whole dynamic? Okay? And the fact that I'm just role-playing a little bit with you guys, this is practice for me. I'm kind of practicing it a little bit. So that if it ever does happen, I've got some things there. I've got something to say. And now he's kind of in the hot seat, right? I'm not trying to make him feel bad. I'm trying to force him to live with the consequences of his own worldview. And all I used was a simple 3-word question to change the dynamic there. Okay, I need to give you a break. Let's take a 15-minute break. 3:15. Be back here.